That is so cool. Sorry, can we, let's not do that. Okay, we have a few things to cover tonight. We have 2 presenters tonight. Am I right? Am I right? 2 groups presenting? Yes? Great. We have Fang Yang, we have Hao Nan. Who else? Yang Si. Okay. Neil. Great. Viola, Dao Yu, Fei Shan. Oh, 2 Neils. Maria. Oh, excellent. You got double me. Double trouble. Even worse. Okay. Don't know why we do this, but you never know. Because somewhere on the other side of the world, someone might watch this video and tell me, write me a message saying, I'm studying global supply chain management, but I find your classes so much more interesting than my professor in my university. That actually happened. All right? It actually happened. I got a message on YouTube. And that was from, the student was in UC Berkeley. So it was a good university, but they just found what we're doing is so much more interesting. So, but that's the great thing about you. All of you can do the same. What I mean is you could find a better teacher than me online and say the same thing about me. I'm okay. So when we come to the education landscape, the world is a very competitive place these days. Let me just unravel that. That's better. Great. Tell you what, I'm full of radioactivity tonight. It's all right. All good. Okay. We've got everyone here. This is great. Camera's recording, but I don't know if it's recording at the right direction, but we will get there. Yeah, that's about right. Maybe back a little bit. Okay. Okay, that's great. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Excellent, fantastic. Okay. All right, we've got to warm everyone up again. Warm everyone up. How do we warm up for this class? How do we warm up for this class? Oh, come on, online people, can you do better than that? Online, how do we warm up? Okay. Come on, once again, come on. All right. This one.
Fire.
Fire.
What's got into you? What are you tired by week 8? Come on.
Fire.
Right, that's better. I know the security guy did come in on that first week. You see a little bit reluctant. What about this one? Yeah, it actually did happen. I'm afraid of that. You know, I was thinking in the past week I might try it again just to see, but no, I won't do that. No, it's too scary. All right. So why do I talk about that? What is a 4-letter word that describes what we just said? Fire, sand, zzz. What's a 4-letter word that describes all of that?
Risk.
Pardon?
Risk.
Risk, exactly, risk. And for the first 7 weeks of this unit, for the first 7 weeks of this unit, it was all about the risk faced by the SME. It's all about the risk faced by startups. It's all about the risk faced by companies that do not have the resources. But what we're going to do tonight is we're going to change gear. We are now moving into the realm of the multinational. We're moving into the realm of the large company, companies that have the resources, companies that have the lawyers, companies that have the research to do everything, to double check everything, triple check. You're with me here? All right. So therefore, what can you learn from that? Like maybe I'm taking you back to the boring old what a traditional supply chain management unit is about, because none of them talk about what we've been talking about for the last 7 weeks. Like I want you to think, in the last 7 weeks, I want you to think practically, what have you learned? Pardon?
Checklist
A checklist of what?
for screening, for products, for suppliers.
A checklist for suppliers. What else did you learn? Practically, come on.
Contract will save you.
Challenges.
Yeah.
Contract won't save you. Okay, a little bit of the contract, but what else did you learn? Come on, practically.
RFQ.
RFQ, yes. Finally, someone's awake. RFQ, you learnt the RFQ, all right? No one teaches you that in universities these days, but you just did it, all right? So I want you to think, I'm very practical when it comes to this course, because you go away, you want to be able to say, okay, I can do something practically with this. 1 or 2 of you might want to start buying stuff and selling on Amazon. That's always possible, all right? So a textbook's not going to teach you how to do that, all right? You have to do an RFQ. You should do, what else did you learn? What other practical thing did you learn? Come on. Other practical things. Come on, I showed you in class, you looked at it. You looked at several examples.
Quality control.
Yeah, the quality control, all right? And the major defect and minor defect, am I right?
The AQL.
AQL, yes. And often when I talk to buyers, I say, yeah, oh, you want a level 2? Oh, and then the minimum level 2, and depending on what size, sample size, 10,000. So we take a sample of 200, right? And then level 2, then it's okay if you get 7 major failures, you'll still pass. Like, put your hand up if you find that weird. Hello? Anyone? You don't find that strange? Let me repeat. All right, you're spending $20,000, $30,000 US, and you pay $350 for a QC guy to go into the factory. He comes back to you and says, oh, by the way, out of that 200, oh, there were 7 major failures out of the 200. Oh, but it's okay, I pass. It passes. Put your hand up if you find that strange as a buyer, yes or no? All right, so I just want you to practically, you're becoming aware of what is actually happening out there. All right, the textbook would say, oh, if you get 1 failure, then reject. That doesn't happen. All right, that doesn't happen when you employ a third-party auditor. They come back to you and say, oh, we're not going to put our neck on the line. We'll say hold, and over to you, Mr. Buyer. Mr. Buyer, you make a decision, because they don't want to take the risk. They say pass, and then you get a lot of bad stuff. Then they sue you, right? You're with me here, all right? That's what you're dealing with. You're dealing with other humans. You're dealing with other companies trying to do stuff on your behalf. So when you deal with stuff with companies that are doing stuff on your behalf, then what's going to happen? Is it going to be done to your satisfaction? Not likely. All right. If you want to do something properly, then you've got to do it. What? You've got to do it yourself. All right. But in today's world, we seem to be outsourcing everything. Right? Online. You hear me here? All right. You've got to do it yourself. But you know that does not happen. So let's have a look at the PowerPoint slides quickly, because you saw the video of me presenting, so you don't need to see me again, but I just want to highlight what we need to know. Actually, this area, this week 8 is so cool. What I'm going to do is put the Zoom, I'm going to share my screen if you allow me to. Can I do that? Hello? Yes. Okay. Is that coming through clear online? Yes?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's great. Lovely, lovely. Okay, good. All right. So this is the big idea. All right. That if you're going to outsource, you're going to have incurred costs. But I want to take you back on a memorable journey to your other units, because how many of you have learned international management? International management or international business? Cool. Okay. So cultural differences. Great. Well, basically, that's the top row. That's the top row. That's the make view of the world. You know, we go into other countries, set up a sales office. Now we need to know culturally how best to motivate people in another culture. You with me? That's international management. You with me here? All right. So that means you're in make mode. All right. You own the sales office. You haven't outsourced the sales office. That's what multinationals do. They have wholly owned subsidiaries, or they have joint ventures. Okay. Another week you may have learned difference in a wholly owned subsidiary and a joint venture. Okay, and the risks associated with both. That's what you study in international business. That's your top row. All right. Global supply chain management, like I said right at the beginning of this unit, is not about the customer. It's about the what?
The suppliers.
Online, it's not about the customer. It's about the what? Hello?
Supply chain.
Suppliers.
Finally. Okay, both. Okay, in class, you fail. Online, you fail. All right? Let's try a little bit harder next time when I ask you a question. All right. All right. Okay, sorry, that's not out of a teaching textbook to tell a student that they fail. All right, but I don't care, because I want you to have a memorable experience in this unit. All right, see this. When you're in supply chain mode and global supply chain, you are buying, you are outsourcing, you're in buy mode, you're not in make mode. And so if any of you are going to do a PhD one day and you're going to study business and that, the professor will say to you, oh, it sounds like that's a make or buy problem you're looking at. Now you know what we're talking about. All right. So a make or buy problem is, well, that's what multinationals do. They sort of own everything. They make everything themselves. And that's what they're talking about now. The geopolitical rhetoric is, oh, let's get out of China. Let's get out of these countries. Let's come home. And what? Reshore, right? Reshore. We come home. That means let's forget about this buying from overseas and global sourcing. Let's come home and make ourselves. let's not be a multinational. Let's just come home and just be domestic. Okay. So there's your global supply chain at the bottom. All right, where you are buying, you are outsourcing. When you outsource, you are buying from someone else. Someone else is making it for you. You are buying what they make. Good. So when you are make mode, all you care about are political, xenophobic, environmental risk. Why? Because when you are in make mode, you're in another country, people can see your company and maybe they can trash your door if they don't like your country. Maybe they can boycott you if they don't like your country. That happens, right? That's what we mean by xenophobic risks. That's what we mean. And then there's environmental risks and political. The governments in that country may require you to do something special because your brand is in their company and your brand is employing people, your brand is polluting or something. They can see your brand physically with an office that you are in that country. Okay, so when you are making yourself, you're open to the world of those risks. But when you are buying, you can be secretly in another country buying, no one knows, right? But the problem is yeah, you lose control. You lose control because suppliers may lie to you. Suppliers may not tell you everything. Oh, they'll tell you the truth, but they may not tell you all of the truth. Are you with me here? All right. There's truth. There are suppliers that are truthful to you, but they just don't tell you everything. Why don't they tell you everything? Because you didn't ask. All right. All right. You didn't ask. All right. So yeah, so you got control costs and coordination costs. This is the relationship risk, and this is your operational risk. Relationship risk, that is the supplier really, you just lose trust. You don't trust that they will do things that you ask them to do. All right. Operational risk. Oh, that's the big problem for the last 2 years. What was the problem for the last 2 years? COVID, and that caused a lot of coordination costs. What do we mean by coordination costs? Actually, online, you're beating the class. You seem to be more alive now. One for the online. Come on, class, you got to beat the onliners now. All right, competition, huh? All right, coordination. This is when you're trying to get stuff from A to B, physical. Trying to get stuff out of China to the US. But nearly impossible. Why? Because in 2020 and parts of 2021, different provinces are locked down. Factories had to shut down. Why? Because the workers can't come to the factory because they're stuck in their hometown because their hometown is locked down under quarantine for 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Oh, we don't know for how much longer, but it's every weekend. Oh, we need to do it for another week. Oh, we need to do it for another week. That's not a relationship problem. That's an operational coordination problem. You with me? Okay. All right. So these things happen. Okay. So I just want to show you on the big picture, you chose global supply chain management, you're studying international business, you're studying international management, but they're close together. So what you have studied is based in the other units is the make view of the world rather than the buy view of the world. Okay. Yeah. And so the first 7 weeks, it was all about buying as an SME, buying as a startup, buying as a solopreneur. All right. The next 3 weeks is buying as a multinational. More power now, huh? Okay. Excellent. Great. So just want to show you. Okay, so we're going to play a game now. There are 5 words that describe my interactions with Vitegeist of VF Corp, senior manager at HTC, and also Andor de Court of Puma, who is the global supply chain manager of Puma operations. Actually, These two are based in Hong Kong, of course, Taiwan. All right. So what was VF? If I asked Veit Ghost, and you saw Veit in the third video, right? The German in the third video, right? So I speaking to him at a supply chain conference in Hong Kong many years ago, and I asked him, "Oh, what is your biggest challenge?" Remember the video that you watched? They were talking about the challenge for the last 2 years, like the pandemic. So they were talking about the challenges. What was the big challenge he was talking about in that video? Okay. This is online. Online, you have, what did I say? Let's have a competition here. Class, online. Okay, online. Both of you failed on the first time. Okay. Online, you have 1 point. Okay. Next question for online or class. Who is first gets the next point. Are you ready? All right. So when you watch the video of, and Veit is talking in that video about the problems during 2020, 2021 continued on anyway. What did he say was the major problem?
Cost of time.
Cost of time. In the video.
For VF Corp.
Okay, and class, what was he talking about? Pardon?
Order shifts like sea freight to
Big, loud voice.
sea freight to air freight to sea freight. So changes in order shift. Order shift. So they cannot inspect the quality of the.
Yeah. Can I inspect the quality? Okay. All right. Sorry, that was a bit quick online. Class, you did well. But online, you were correct, but you were correct for the wrong question. But don't worry, you're ahead of the curve. All right. And maybe have another microphone if we can get the class involved a bit more. All right. So hang on to that online. That answer to the right question comes up. When I talked to Veit Ghost in several years ago before the pandemic, I asked him what's his biggest challenge. So which of these did he say out of 1 out of 5? Now, class or online, you can yell out any one of these. So we'll give it, let's go class first. Which one? Pardon? Cost. All right. Anything else?
Cost of time for VF Corp.
Pardon?
Cost of time for VF Corp.
Yes, cost of time. Cost of time. All right. Class, you did well. Okay. Very good. Again. And online? Online, are you with us? Come on. What do we
Cost of
mean by
time as
cost?
well.
Yeah, I know, but what do we mean by that?
Buying time to see if orders can be delivered, basically.
Basically, the time. When I talked to Veit, he said, because remember, he's in charge of VF Corp. They're the largest manufacturer of jeans in the world. Okay, 150 million jeans per year. All right, million, not thousand, million. All right. Okay, so big. This is big, right? And he said, "Oh, we get Mexico to make the 5-pocket variety, which has been the same design for the last decade or more, 2 decades. But for the new designs, we send across to the more skilled workers in China. But the problem is, when we get it done in China, we have to wait 5 weeks to get the product shipped back to our market. And so our biggest challenge is that cost of delay to market of our higher end design jeans." Interesting, isn't it? Huh? All right. So now HTC, when I talk to HTC, what is their biggest challenge? Class? Pardon? And explain.
And how they forecast their suppliers. Yeah, the purchasers.
Very good. The forecast. If I can get the forecast right, then we can run the supply chain like clockwork. Okay. If we talk to Puma, what is their biggest challenge? Online
Their reputation.
Why? Why is that a big challenge for them?
Because of how big they are already.
Yeah, well, everyone's big, right? All of these are big. VF Course big, HTC is big, Puma's big. But what was special about that made Puma worry about its reputation risk?
当时的
Continue, please.
2016 the quality about the clothes is bad, was bad.
Yeah, and what caused this rip in the t-shirt was poor material quality that was sent to the supplier that was making the garments for Puma. Yeah, and Anne Lord, the court was talking about this, and she was saying that the next day, because this was in the league in Europe, the next day she had about 30 emails from senior management in Puma, like senior. This is not from junior, like president, board of directors, CEO. Fix this, all right? Like fix it today. What is wrong? Fix it. It doesn't happen again. All right. Like, you know, that is bad for the reputation. Am I right? Okay. So, you know, solopreneurs, SMEs, they don't have this problem. You with me here? All right. But multinationals they have these problems. What I did talk about on my video, that, yeah, you can have all of these, but really only two. Yeah, 2 out of those 4 plus the middle one. All right. Quality is non-negotiable often, okay, in any operational circles. Okay. You'd never recommend to management, oh, let's just go for a lower quality. You don't do that. That is not a strategy. Okay. But you can trade off cost versus having a larger volume and quicker time. That's going to cost you more. If you want a larger volume for cheap cost, it's going to take you longer. You're with me here. So you can have 2 of these, can't have all 3 if you want to keep quality the same. And the big thing that, if you look, some of you are thinking, oh, textbook. Yeah, EOQ model, that comes from textbook, operational textbook. The JIT model comes from an operational textbook. But what was the big thing that the pandemic made sensitive in these models? Which one? What was the issue that the pandemic brought to the attention of boards of directors in managing their supply chain? Which of these models was upended because of the pandemic? Which one?
The GI.
The JIT model, absolutely. And why? Why was that?
Lots of inventory to minimize.
Yeah, because a lot of companies were focused on the JIT, and what you do is you have minimal inventory, and in normal circumstances, then things run clearly. But when the pandemic came along, suddenly you have stock out costs. You with me? And that's what, and now they realize, oh, we should have more inventory. We should have more inventory. And so JIT is not flavor of the month at the moment. It's not flavor of the month. Okay. So you can think about, if we can get the forecast perfect, if we know what our customer's going to order every month for the next 3 years, then, you know, we don't need to sort of play around with these models. All right. We just put it in, and then we know exactly what we want, and then we make it according to exactly what we want. But what did we learn? What did we learn last week? Let me turn it around a bit. Remember last week, we had these companies, they went to Indiegogo and Kickstarter. And what did Indiegogo and Kickstarter do to these companies? Come on, what happened? What did they get from Indiegogo and Kickstarter? They got money. They got money, right? Yes or no?
Yes.
And what else did they get? orders. Am I right? Yes or no? All right. And they got exact orders. Am I right? Yes or no? All right. They actually got perfect demand. You with me here? But what did we learn? That some of these companies still failed, even when they had perfect demand. They know exactly how many they have to deliver by a deadline. And most of these companies miss the deadline. Yeah, because they didn't know how to manage this part and this part. Ah, interesting, huh? Interesting. So that's the problem. Yes, sir.
But when you know the exact orders, will be favorable to use the JIT model more because you have because sometimes you have a dilemma on carrying the cost of inventory
Yep.
and using the JIT. So if you can predict exact orders, then would it be better to use the JIT model?
Yeah, I'm just saying, in the real world, you're going to have variation. You're going to be, you need to bring your analytics mind into it and have, okay, and there's going to be a normal distribution of orders based on the last 5 years, last 3 years, or last 6 months. Okay, well, the pandemic has actually thrown that into disarray because we now cannot rely on history for the last 2 years. Are you with me? But up until 2019, you could always machine learn our history for the last 3 years, rolling 3 years, and then exacerbate that out until the future. Are you with me? Well, now the pandemic's saying, well, sorry, no, really can. We just don't know what's going to happen next 6 months. So therefore, you really can't do much planning at all. It's hard. It's not easy. But the one thing you're going to learn in the coming 3 weeks, remember 3 weeks, we're really focusing on the big company, is how these big companies work to find out the supply capacity. How do they find out the supply cost structure? Because these are big unknowns. And they matter. They matter to HTC because HTC in 2012 was making 30 million smartphones in the year because Apple's doing 250 million. But I understand that, Apple's the big player in the crowd today, and Samsung. But back in 2012, HTC was one of the big Android manufacturers. All right. So because of that huge volume, then they need to find out more about what the suppliers are. Now, this is from the textbook I just showed you. This is from the textbook. If you go into operations management, they're going to teach you about trade-offs. If you go into management accounting, they're going to teach you stuff about the EOQ model. They're going to teach you about the just-in-time model and all of that. That's all textbook stuff. All right. What I've got here is a 3-phase model that I put together based on my extensive work in this area in the last decade, and interviews with managers, interviews with the large companies. That is often, and it's interesting, I talk about multi-sourcing. I've been talking about that for several years now. Now everyone thinks, oh, it's flavor of the month. Why is multi-sourcing flavor of the month? Why is multi-sourcing a viable strategy?
Because you can't put all eggs in one basket.
Yeah, because you just cannot forecast out. You just don't know what's going to happen. All right, it's a risk management strategy. It's a risk mitigation. It's a contingency risk or risk avoidance strategy. Okay, and pandemic has actually made multi-sourcing flavor of the month in many industries, when in the past we just relied on one supplier. But in the consumer electronics, in the big volume stuff, what Apple's doing, Motorola, HTC, Samsung, Oppo, Vivo, OnePlus, and all of them, Vivo. Okay. This lecture is brought to you by Vivo. Okay, all right. I had to put that one in there. All right. Okay, all right. It's thrown all that out the window because they're doing big, ginormous volumes. When you do the huge volumes, you cannot rely on one supplier. because every one of these phones has about 200 components inside. 200. And I've got the data from HTC back in 2010, 11, and 12, because we're working on research with them. And the orders from some of their suppliers, on average, every week, were in the millions. This is every week. We're not saying millions per year. We're talking about every week. Millions of components. So when you've got that big, when you've got the, can you find me one supplier that has the capacity to support Apple or HTC on these components? Not really. Because my study at HTC across 15 components in a smartphone, I can't bore you with the academic research, but as I show you, they had 78 suppliers supplying 15 components. So on average, minimum, they had 3 suppliers for a component, maximum they had 11 suppliers for another component. 3 to 11. 3 to 11. Okay, and they're talking about 78 suppliers, and that's just for 15 components. All right, and there's over 100 more components to put into a smartphone. All right, you multiply it out. So it's it's understandable that, they're going to have 600, 700 suppliers, 800 suppliers. Okay, because that's what multi-sourcing does, right? It just maximizes everything. Okay, now, if we're going to multi-source, then you've got 2 big challenges to work with. You've got to work with a contract, and then you've got to work on development. So tonight, I got you to watch the videos, but also my lecture video focus more on the development side. Next week, the presentations on HTC, there's a presentation on PQI. Who's presenting on HTC? Okay, you're on HTC. And who's on PQI? Online, is that right? PQI next week. Who's presenting?
Yes.
Excellent. Good. All right, doing PQI. That's much more on how they had formal controls in place to manage the contract and the supplier, and how to manage the multi-sourcing arrangement. Okay. Whereas tonight, just quickly want to just show you some of the things we learn on the supply development side, because you've got to have both. You must have both, otherwise suppliers won't stay with you. Okay. In some ways, this is the formal side, this is the informal side of the whole relationship. And so if I look at some of the best practices, and you saw this in my lecture video very quickly, what was the big thing that you took away in watching my video? Let's to the floor again for you to answer my question. The question is, what was the big best practice that you learned from my video in my first video from this slide? Don't all speak at once. Hello? It's in front of you. What did you learn?
Sustainable supply chain.
Pardon?
Sustainable supply chain.
Well, how do you make it sustainable? Remember, this is this part of the 3-circle. Remember a 3-circle control framework for the first 7 weeks? Now we've got the 3-circle framework for the large buyers. Okay? And under supply development, the big idea that I learned and I saw practiced by all of these companies to some degree was supplier staging. Remember many years ago when how many of you had a frequent flyer program with an airline? Anyone? One person in this class. What, no one else flew in an airplane? Didn't you have weren't you a loyal customer? Okay, all right. Online, did you fly up until the pandemic? Anyone of you fly?
Yep, the Malaysia Airlines Enrich program.
Yeah, so Malaysia Airlines has an Enrich program, right? So you have basic, and then you have silver, and then platinum, right? And then as you go higher, your relationship with the airline gets stronger. Am I right? Well, it's supposed to anyway, in theory. Okay. Same thing idea with the suppliers. H&M, silver, gold, and platinum. So the platinum suppliers were the ones that were much more privy to the 3-year outlook and the pipeline that the suppliers are going to be involved with. Whereas the silver suppliers, like the newer suppliers or ones that haven't proven themselves, well, H&M didn't bother them about talking about the next 3 years. Those silver suppliers they talked about for the next 6 months. You with me here? And so it was a way of staging suppliers into different levels of relationship. And that's how they work with the suppliers. So you wouldn't do that as an SME. You wouldn't do that as a solopreneur. But that's what the multinationals are doing. Remember, tonight we're starting with how do the multinationals do it? How do they do it differently than a solopreneur or an SME? Staging. Okay, IKEA does the same. The other thing they were doing was, up until the pandemic, these multinationals, they were sending their design teams to the factory in China because they found that email was not efficient. Email was not efficient to communicate new designs. The backwards and forwards, it just took too long. And so I remember Giorgio Armani told me, S. Oliver told me, oh, Giorgio Armani, they send out designers from Italy, S. Oliver from Germany into China for 2 or 3 weeks to working on new designs. And they just figure it out backwards and forwards in 1 day. It just took forever on email to get that, just to, because when you do it over email for a distance, you would have to have a sign off. And then ultimately you couldn't sign off until the sample was actually sent back to the head office, right? Because you need to physically see, what does this design look like? The golden sample, you with me? But the design is already there at the factory. You don't need to send the golden sample back to the head office. Okay, so just keep in mind, big thing, the golden sample, how they deal with that is a big difference. Golden sample. All right. So, and then virtual design teams, we had this staging. These were the best practices that were done by S. Oliver, Puma, IKEA, H&M, and semiconductor, the consumer electronics. We're going to talk more about that next week. But just want to show you this tree. I drew this tree. All right. I drew this tree. I made this tree. Okay. Based on watching a presentation by Anne-Laure Decourt to Supply Chain Conference in Hong Kong a few years ago. And based the way she described it, then I drew it. She was talking about co-management, co-training, co-creation. This co-training is about the development of the supplier. The co-management is about, it's just like staging, allowing the supplier to be part of the extended pipeline that Puma has. And then co-creation, focusing much more on the environment and sustainability. This is a rich area for doing a project on if you're interested. And as I talked about IKEA, and so this is kind of my summary of what I learned from those IKEA, S. Oliver, Giorgio Armani, Puma, talking to these executives. They're concerned about compliance risks, but there's a big push to work with the supplier on the relationship. That is this side here, the supply development, because next week is you're focusing on here. Okay, so big takeaway, 4 big trade-offs. Like I said, you can have cost, scope, right? Time, quality. You can't have all. Okay, you keep one constant, you can have 2 of the other. All right, and that's what happened. Remember the audit that we did 2 weeks ago? Remember we went with Joy Hung with the photo frame. On the first round, it was $23 FOB. Then the buyer came back 2 months later. Oh, I want to buy 5,000 more. Oh, sorry, it's $26 now. Yeah, but the first 5 days, 20. Sorry, price has gone up. Sorry, it's 26 now. All right. Okay. So, these are trade-offs that the buyer had to make. Why? Because they went with a much better supplier at the beginning. They went with a higher quality. Joy Hung passed the audit at a higher quality than the other one. All right. So in some ways there was a trade-off there and you had to pay the price because that supplier had more power. Okay. Multi-supplier management model design teams. All right. This management model is the big thing I want you to keep in. This is the big thing I want you to really embrace for this week, next week, and the week after. That is, got multi-sourcing. What goes in here? C for what? Contract. D for development. Yes. Okay. All right. And the sequence of development, staging. I think that's a big thing that companies were practicing. So it's kind of like airline frequent flyer models. All right. Do you like our dog? Sorry, bird. Right. Like our bird. All right. Be careful for what you order. Make sure you know what you are ordering. Okay. All right. I reckon make that into a stuffed animal. That'd be very famous, wouldn't it? All right. So let's go back to your video, and that is the big questions. I've got some answers here, but I'm not going to show you. What service does Pivot 88 provide? What service does Pivot? Pardon? Software. Yeah. And what does that software do?
QC process, reports, money.
Give you QC templates that you can easily fill up, third party or
Yeah. So Pivot 88, number one. Okay. They provide software, right?
Yes.
All right. But it's connected with particular hardware, right?
Yeah.
All right. What is that hardware? It's a tablet. So basically, the client says, oh, we've got these factories, and then they make the factory have several tablets. And then the tablets carry their software. And they've got 12,000, they actually have distributed this software and hardware tablet to over 12,000 factories now. 12,000. Okay. So the demand is there. This is what we mean by, what's the D word? This is what we mean by what? It's here. Digitization. All right. This is what we mean by digitization. All right. We're actually trying to get visibility of something through bytes, which is the software, the computer, right? Rather than, remember, you can't send a handshake through email, right? But you can send an update on, where is your product in the assembly line? Are you with me here? All right. So we can digitize those updates. And that's what Vite was talking about in that video. Okay. That's what the lady was talking about, Pivot 88. She showed you this. Did you see the tablet she was using?
Yes.
So you could do a project on that, because that is really interesting stuff for what's happening in supply chains now, in the big supply chain. Remember, just remind you, you gave your projects last week, but please make sure your project is motivated, it is current, it is relevant to sustainability, it is relevant to practice that we see today, and it is relevant to the pandemic, it's relevant to 2022 today. Okay, so just keep that in mind when you're motivating your project idea. All right, what was the other big thing that came out? What were the big challenges faced by GAP in managing its suppliers? I remember the other guy he was in charge of GAP, VP. What was his big challenge that he talked about?
Tracing problem.
Tracing?
quality control.
Quality control.
Definitely quality control. Yeah, definitely quality control. But what did he talk about? What did he talk about? What was the notion of quality control he was talking about?
inspection is too late.
What did he say about the factories? Factories
Overly relying on the
they were over
relying on QC.
starts with A. You're right, what did you say? Online, are you with me here? A,
Yes.
yep. A, U. Come on, what's the word?
Audit.
They were over audited.
Yes.
All right, because they were saying in the video that, you know, some factories or suppliers, they have a dozen audits every 2 years. And they're just, you know, the audits for customer one, another audit for customer two. They were talking about the idea of it'd be nice to get to a stage where one audit can be shared with multiple customers. And then, you know, so you need to have commonality of what each of those customers want in their audit, because sometimes the audits are customized to what the customer wants. And so one customer doesn't necessarily value the audit from another customer because the auditor is not checking everything that first customer wants. But they were over audited, but in some ways that the factories had a lot of QC, quality checks. They had a lot of quality checks, but they didn't have enough quality control. That was the big idea. What do you mean by quality control? They didn't have enough quality control systems. Okay, of course, they had auditors visiting them all the time and rating them, check, fine. But when the auditor go away, there was nothing there to check on anything. There was no system checks. And they said that is a major problem. Okay, there are a lot of these factories in developing economies, China, India, Vietnam, like there's many of them in this region. Okay, they don't have the quality system in place. They're relying too much on the order to come in 1 month, another order to come in, and then it just becomes normal business. We've got a new customer. When's the auditor coming? And they're ready for the auditor. You with me here? So the order comes and goes, and then they go back to their old practices, which may not be what we learned from those factory visits. They're not always environmentally friendly anyway. All right, why? Because they have lots of rejects. Okay, no one's talking about that. Okay, so that's what we learned from the second one. And VF Corp, how do they manage their? What did Veit Gase talk about? How he managed How did Veit Gase explain how he managed the process in their suppliers? What did he do? Class, let's make sure we're clear on what we're doing here. All right. Let me just summarize again. Okay. So remember, this is Pivot 88. All right. It's soft. We're going to finish soon. It's software as a service, but using tablets. Okay, that's fine. Okay, but that was number one. The big idea from number two was that factories, they did not have a QC system in place. All right, a quality control system in place. They're basically living from audit to audit to audit to audit. All right. So there's no continuous improvement going on, no way of managing their costs better, managing the rejects better, and it's not sustainable.
Sorry, I have a question.
Yes, Sharafa.
In terms of like working teams, in a business, would that be under quality management, or like what umbrella does it go under?
It's interesting that, because Veit talks about it, that the factories are talking about, they need to go from a mindset of quality check to quality management. All right, Sharifa, I think you hit the nail on the head there. That it did talk about needs from the QC, the inspection that just goes from time to time, to ongoing quality management, where you're actually focusing on continuous improvement, reducing the rejects, solving problems, and making things better. Why? Because then you do cost down. You're going to find out all about that because the group presenting next week from HCC and PQI, they're in an industry where it's 5% or more cost down every 3 months. It's just very cutthroat. Okay, number 3, what was the third idea? Veit was talking about this. Veit from VF Corp. He talked about, what did he talk about? It starts with D.
Digitizing.
Yes. All right. He talked about digitization. All right. And his idea was that we need to actually put there are labels on every garment, but now they actually put a code in that label that none of you know what that code is about, but it's a code that tells Veit which line, which worker, which sewing machine worked on that garment. And so they can go back and solve the problem. Is it the machine problem? Is it a training the worker problem and things like that? And so with that, he was able to trace and then solve and then continuously improve. So this was, I thought that was, that video, I think, is very, very useful. Why? Because it's in the middle of pandemic. It's 2020. And these are very senior supply chain leaders they're talking about operational things. Did you notice that? They weren't talking about, is on the couch and, having very big trouble with the suppliers and blah, 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 and all general BS that you get at many conferences, right? And you go out from a conference, you learn nothing. All right. They were talking about real stuff. They were talking about their real problems and how they were solving them. So that video is very, very, I found it very useful, and I don't share many of them these days. All right. So enough of me. Let's have a break. Like, I've actually summarized that, and so you can actually take that summary. I've just put details of that so you can compare that with what you wrote in your preparation for the class tonight. And that was my brief summary of those videos. I think it's good that you go through that. Number one, all right, the 3 circles I talk about, the three circles I talk about, all right, we're just focusing on here, this circle here, the whole development. But this whole area here, I think it was important because in some ways, this is pre-pandemic. Am I right? Everything I was talking about, sending design teams in. No, sorry, you couldn't do that for the last 18 months in China. Staging. Yeah, good luck with staging. Good luck with trying to get anything shipped from A to B. You're with me here, all right? The ideal world before pandemic I talked about, but the great thing about that video, the 3 videos talked about, there was my summary, there was the interview with Pivot 88, and then there was the 3 seniors talking about their challenges. That's the new reality. And the new reality is we need to digitize more so we can have more traceability on what's going on in a factory that we cannot visit today or tomorrow in the next month. You with me? And so I think when you're doing your project, if you're actually touching any of those areas, you need to really hone in on what is the new norm now that the pandemic has come. Now, when the pandemic goes, these practices is probably going to be a new norm compared to what I just talked about here. Are you with me? And I might need to update my little framework. Okay. All right. So let's have a break for 7 minutes and happy to take questions, but thank you. And great to see everyone online this evening.
Discuss on automation. In progress. In terms of automation, no evidence was found in the production line. There is no use of machine and it will lead to inconsistency of making quality products. Now I want you all to look in closer to this video. If you realize this lady here is performing quality check on the product. And on the QC list, checklist that Dr. Neil is picking out, he notices that there is a lot of misalignment of the radio phase and the board. If these employees were to use cradles, according to Dr. Neil, and automation is installed, there will be less errors and process will be more productive and efficient. In this process, employees actually can possess a very high risk of incorrect assembly or soldering.
So when we look into Raytalk, they actually do have automation in certain sectors of the assembly line. So here you can actually see he is using a machine. This is to basically fix the earpieces and the cables together. And something about their consumers or the customers that they supply to, they are first responders. So it would include like police, firemen, and all that. So the purpose that they mentioned in the video is it needs to be automated to ensure that the final product is of high quality and is consistent and can handle the rugged environments that it will be used in by first responders. So now I'll pass it on to Sandra and Pritham.
Hi guys, I'm Sandra from Team RICO, and that's Pritham. He'll be representing Team Raytalk. So first, we're going to look into security of molds. Molding is a common processing for mass plastic parts production. As we see in this video, RICO has no automation or molds at all.
Meanwhile, in the case of Raytalk, they do have a molding process where plastic and components are actually joined together. So in this particular video, you can see at the beginning there was some items which are stacked over here. So these are actually the molds that are being used. And as we swing across to the left, we see that these molds are in a factory which is shared with 2 other manufacturers. So because of there is no access control, there's no gates or grills, anybody from other segments can actually walk across to the area where the molds are being kept. The supplier actually said that the molds are very heavy and difficult to be stolen, but nowadays with our phones, with digitalization, we can just take a photo and make a copy of those molds. So as a supplier, you may not want, or you may be concerned about picking Raytalk because of stolen IP sort of issues.
Now we will look into customization through rework. For RICO, products were being customized after production and packaging has been completed. In the video, Dr. Neil mentions that it looks like they're undoing lots. So, which means there is a question regarding the efficiency of this process, because after the production and packaging has been completed, they take it out of the packets and then do the customization.
Meanwhile, in the case of Raytalk, there was no evidence or occurrence of rework being performed.
Next, we look into the occupational health and safety. So in RICO, there were fire extinguishers spotted, but the areas were cramped and there were no emergency exits. This obviously is a huge red flag, because in a factory, premises, there has to be emergency exits in case of any occurrences and disasters. So RICO did have some measures in terms of health and safety, like the fire extinguishers, but those were definitely not adequate.
Meanwhile, in the case of RayTalk, we didn't take a snapshot here, but the work areas were actually well spaced out. Everything was well organized. Instead, what we want to draw your attention to is, again, because of the use of automations and heavy machinery, this is actually one of the molding machines that I talked about in the case of the molds. So typically, in the case of these sort of machines, you would want to see some sort of hand screen, acrylic hand screen, where the machine cannot be operated until the screen has been dropped down. But here you can see there's nothing in the way, and the operator can move his hands in and out to make use of to operate or to start the machine. So I suppose, if you were standing here in front of this particular machine, your response would be, instead of sand or fire, this will be ouch.
So this is the summary of our findings after we went through both the videos of both the suppliers. So we have actually analyzed our suppliers' production process in a production flow perspective. So you can see it starts from receiving material inspection until output warehousing. So we obviously had to take out some video evidence due to time constraints in the presentation. Now I'll pass it on to Abhi.
Okay. Now, if you realize in this blue box, there's one mark. Can I get a guess from you guys what mark that you guys are seeing something abnormal from all the marks that is there?
The QC quality control.
Yeah. So point number 8. So are y'all willing to hear from us again? Like, give me a few minutes to answer why there is question marks for point number 8.
Yes.
Yes, huh? Sure. Your yes doesn't seem like like that. Okay, so basically, all right. So this is what I'm going to explain now. So okay, RICO was not actually from what you guys have been listening. RICO was not actually following any protocols. The employee was actually plugging. If you realize, they was plugging the product into the tester, but was not checking whether this machine reads out or not. But instead, just check whether this product just gets switched on or not only. So on the other hand, RayTalk, the company had special adapter to minimize the damage to the product during the quality testing process. However, they have a special room in this factory for product sampling for quality testing purposes. However, in the whole long video, when Dr. Neil visited, they actually have they actually had like machines in that room, but they were not in use, which brings us a question: Are they actually conducting the final product sampling testing? And what sort of impression now do you guys get from here? So my question to you guys right now: so based on all these previous presentations that our friends have done all this while, and now from us, do you think the quality testing and control are up to the standards for these both suppliers?
Hands up for yes.
Hands up for yes. I mean, you guys can talk also.
I think even online students can raise their
Yeah,
hand.
online also can
Can use
answer.
the Zoom function.
If you guys say no, say ouch. If you guys say yes, then say yes. So 1, 2, 3. Oh, okay, that's nice. Thank you so much. So now I'll pass to Sandra.
So our final question for you guys is, which supplier would you decide to source from? So whoever decides to source from Team RICO, please raise your hands. Okay, so can anyone tell me one thing that is the no-no for them? Like, why would you not source from Team RICO? Lynn, you look like you have an answer.
I mean, overall, it's obvious. From the input, the materials pile up, it's not being stacked properly because it's easily damaged. And me as a buyer, I wouldn't want to buy damaged products. and also no proper QC, and yeah, and also other things. There's a lot of red flags. Yeah. I mean, in this case, I would prefer to choose Raytalk. Yeah, even though Raytalk is not perfect.
Thank you, Lynn. I hope his participation marks have increased. So which of you want to source from Raytalk? Lynn already says he wants to. Anyone else? Online? Do you guys have any reasons why Raytalk is the better supplier?
Yeah, it seems
Maybe we just skip the last question.
Yes. Anyone online? Yes, Viola, please go ahead.
So basically I agree with Lynn, from your presentation slide, it's obvious that Raytalk, they follow protocols more than Radar. So I think it's good.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Viola. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you. So I mean, I think when we just wanted to conclude this particular discussion with, I'm sure all of you are interested to hear which supplier we would want, we, the deers in the headlights, who want to choose. So we had quite a lot of a discussion and argument, a discussion about this particular topic, and we also were on the fence. But I think once we went through the entire analysis, we came to a landing that there's probably no right answer in this particular case. So if, for example, if you as a buyer put a lot of value on having a very short lead time for your products, and the products can be customized very quickly to what you require, you may, and it maybe it's a low value product, for example, you may not really put a very heavy emphasis on, if there's some minor scratches or the product has been opened and re-customized. You want the product fast and you want the product cheap. So then you might want to go with Ricoh. In the case of Raytalk, for example, yes, they have a lot of good virtues, but for some customers, they place a very strong emphasis on the occupational health and safety of the workers that are manufacturing those products, especially as they've gone through the ethics course class. So for them, having the use of heavy equipment where there is the lack of protection on workers, I think that's a very big red flag. So that may actually totally turn them off from picking Raytalk until and unless they put these sort of values, more emphasis on these sort of values to make sure that the workers are safe. So in conclusion, we don't have a conclusion. I think it really depends on what is the buyer's preference and what do they place emphasis on. So that brings us to the next slide. That brings us to the end of our presentation. Thank you very much, and I suppose Q&A if there's any.
Questions, anyone? Can you go back to the blue comparison? I'm glad you put some check marks on Raytalk. It's interesting. Yeah. All right. To class and online, what is the big surprise? What's a big surprise for you based on what you see? Any surprises?
Class.
I'm just surprised that.
Class.
Actually, I'm surprised that I thought everything went good for Raytalk from the start, but when it comes to the occupational health safety, I was actually surprised that even Ricoh has like some fire extinguisher, but no emergency exit. But Raytalk has like really nothing on that, and I think that's based on the CSR. I think what Pritam mentioned, I think that plays a big role. Yeah, especially in developed countries when they want to source from this. Yeah, that's what surprising to me. I expect Raytalk has some good proper occupational health safety.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, so I mean, just to clarify for that particular point, it's not to say that they don't have fire extinguishers and all those factors. They do have it, but we looked at one, you have already gone to the next tier. So have you reached the safety level for that particular tier? Yeah, so I suppose Dr. News, if anybody else.
Let me just go to online. Anyone from online?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes.
Okay. Do you think safety of the workers is important if the supply can give you like cost cutting, like lower cost? Do you think that it is more important than can give you other reliable factor like low cost?
Yeah, hello, Maria. Thanks for your question. If you ask me, this is like a very opinion-based question. As a buyer, oh, hi. So as a buyer, if you ask me, I am a more ethical kind of buyer. So I will definitely want the workers in the factory to be safe in order to produce my products, because they can give me for lower price. But what if something bad happens to that particular worker, and that affects my product? So we never know what is there, the sand or the fire inside it. So that's my opinion. I'll pass to my groupmate.
I think I just want to add on. I think right now, like worker safety is extremely important, even if you're not trying to be ethical. Like if you guys remember the Rana Plaza incident in Bangladesh, after that, a lot of big companies came into flag, like Zara, H&M, that, why were they sourcing from Bangladesh without like going through these factors, like whether the factories are producing ethically, taking care of its workers. So now I think it's also a reputation-based factors for big companies to source from suppliers who are responsible with their workers' safety, etc. So yeah, I think it's a very big factor in today's day and age.
Okay, what if you were a customer? Oh, what Raytalk were making? What are they making?
Headphones.
Raytalk were making
As in like
The walkie-talkie.
little video unit for police officers, emergency services. Yeah, actually, if you go back to my YouTube, it's interesting because they're also making the radio transmitters for emergency services.
Yep.
So my friend Charles Kermis, who is a major importer of that equipment into the USA, he, just to give you an update, he gave up on Raytalk. He found that they didn't meet his standard. He did order from them at one stage, and that's how I got access to that factory. And he said, oh, they didn't improve and their quality sucks, and he didn't order from them again. But he was ordering big stuff for police departments in the USA, because Raytalk also were making the body cameras, the video, and the two-way. So Raytalk were making them too, and that's what he was ordering. So he went to another supplier. Actually, he invested over $5 million in a joint venture in another factory not far away from Raytalk to make sure he could get that supply at a high quality. So interesting. And you can go into my YouTube channel, you type in Charles and search, you'll find me walking around with him in the trade show. So you can see for yourself. He's very, anyway, that's some background. That doesn't make your presentation different. I just want to give you some background of that. All right, well done, guys.
Thank you.
You want to start or you want me to start?
Lung is waving.
Can I just test my mic? Like, can you guys hear me?
Oh, good.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Let's have a break for about 3 or 4 minutes. Okay, just relax, take your time. Don't rush.
Follow my camera. Just like the
I don't think America. Yeah.
Oh,
That's
right.
problem.
Okay. Or you can mail it to me.
Let me turn through this.
Hey, bro, we are having break, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I go pee.
Go
I
on,
nervous. I nervous. Sorry.
Oh, it's recorded.
Okay, you can redo it. Go ahead. I left at 6. It usually takes me 45 minutes. 3 hours. Took me 2 hours. Yeah.
Three hours to get here.
Ooh.
Yo, that's a terrible.
Almost more than that.
Yeah, I think what the time it was so the traffic was getting building up at the time I came. Yeah. I came here, I left my house at 4:45.
I was stuck on the whole virtually for 1 hour. Because I used to
Oh,
I should get the right
left if you're going to KL.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. But even coming that way also.
Yeah. 45 minutes.
Yeah, normally. Today is really good. Yeah. So I thought you're not here just now.
At least you guys got time.
Hey, you there? How's the pee?
Yeah, good. Quite smooth.
No, your aunt.
You know your roles. You don't have to stress
Not
that.
your uncle level. Okay. My nephew is only yeah. You will be still going forward.
Okay, so which what's our group name?
Giraffe.
Giraffe. Tall group. Okay, everyone, can we give Giraffe a big hand?
give them a big neck.
What was that?
We should give them a big neck.
Yes, a long one. So I'll be very honest, I don't know how we're gonna top them because they did a wonderful job.
Yeah.
Kudos to you. So without much, we're just gonna go right ahead. So we are Team Giraffe. There's three of us actually. There was supposed to be four, but now there's three of us. Basically it's me, Joe, Levi, and Lee that's online, you know, the guy who went to pee.
Okay.
Okay. So without much ado, let's get on with our topic today, which is hoverboards.
Okay, so now let me give the company overview. So the first company we're going to talk about is DBK Electronics. They're located in Shenzhen with about 800 employees. Originally, they were a battery manufacturer for car motors, power banks, and tablets, but then they decided to have a different production line for hoverboards. And then as for their production capacity, since they have two production lines, they can produce about 3,000 per day. And they also export to the US and the UK. Now, our second company is Welland Technology, which is also located in Shenzhen with about 50 employees. They only sell hoverboards, unlike DBK, and they have 4 models. And they export to 3 more countries than DBK, which is Italy, France, Australia. However, when they were interviewed about the hoverboard ban in the US, they were unaware of it. Moving on to the working environment. So as you can see, DBK has a clean and organized factory, and the flow of work is also standardized. So they ensure that it is kept this way to avoid damage to or waste of materials. They also have a good factory layout, which makes the production process more efficient, safer, and faster. Well, on the other hand, has an efficient use of their factory space. As you can see, can you play the video, please? There are loose wires and improperly stacked boxes, which increases the risk of shock hazards and accidental trips. The environment is also susceptible to dust, which might cause machines and other equipment to malfunction. Now, as to the worker safety, as you can see from the video, DBK promotes a safe and a protected atmosphere. They have proper protective equipment in place, such as finger cuts, which protects themselves and the product, anti-static wristband to keep them grounded, as well as gloves and head cap. They also have a ventilation systems for soldering. Now, well, on the other hand, disregards for the safety of their employees. There are no PPE in place, which increases the risk of cuts and electric shocks. And they also have lack of ventilation, which causes serious respiratory conditions. Now I'll pass the time to Lee.
All right, thank you, Levi. So in terms of production line, particularly the assembly system, both adopt different patterns. Joe, can you play the video for both? Is it muted, the video? All right, so as you can see, DBK applies inline transfer system in which the assembly operations are integrated with conveyors. Therefore, the assembly stage is transferred from one workstation to the other. Contrastingly, Weilong uses a single station system, which all the components are assembled into a complete product within one workstation. So both systems are performed by human operator. Thus, the detection of missing or wrongly oriented components are depending on the operator judgment and skills. However, inline transfer system tend to have a higher checking capability and lower human error than single workstation because of higher number of involved operators and also less variety of tasks per operator. Next slide, please. Next slide. All right, so in comparing the presentation of tools and components, so from the image, as we can see, the working desk of DBK is well organized, which the components and tools are stored in the bins. Contrastingly, the product coupons on Wayron operator working desk are scattering around. Therefore, the assembly error would be higher in Wayron, caused by missing or wrong supply. Next slide, please. Next slide. All right. So comparing the method of assembly, from the image, we can notice that DPK adopt fits automation, which uses a custom-built machine to execute a specific task to aid the worker for quick and precise assembly. On the other hand, operator from Wayron assembles the parts manually with general purpose tools like screwdrivers. So by this means, the cost structure of both is different. For example, DPK tend to have higher upfront cost due to the investment on machine. However, for Wayron, the main operator cost is built out from labor costs such as worker benefit or compensations due to injuries. So, although the upfront cost of DPK is higher, it will reduce as the production volume increases. Therefore, in the long run, the price of DPK could be as competitive as Wayron. Besides that, DPK also more capable to handle large volume orders with shorter production lead time. However, for Wayron, they will have an upper limits to the volume and have longer lead time, which can be weeks or even months. Next, please. So viewing for the process of both, pause the video, pause the video. Yep. So viewing for the packing process of both, I'm comparing oranges with apples because I do not have the full information, but I hope that you guys can have an idea of why packaging process also matter to the product quality. So Joe, play a video for both. So as we can see, DPK uses a wrapping machine when packing its battery. With the shrink wrapping, for example, it can protect the product from contaminations like dirt, dust, or even moisture, and thus it increases the product durability. However, for the Wayron, it pack the product manually, hence the product are more vulnerable to the environment and the product quality will be affected, especially for long-haul delivery. Next, please. Next slide. All right, so that's all from my end. I will pass it to Joe for the following parts.
All right. Okay. From a quality control perspective, right? Yes, you can see DPK and Wayron are two very different companies. As you can see, DPK has individual cell testing as well as assembled aging test as per the video. We play a video, please. So as you see on the left, they're doing the individual cell testing. On the right, it's an assembled aging test. Whereas on the right, Wayron has no testing. They actually source their batteries from like local source manufacturers, and they don't actually have like certificates or proof that they mentioned Samsung batteries in their video. However, they don't really have proof of actually using them. Next slide, please. All right, from a quality control perspective, on the left, you can see that DPK actually is very dedicated in terms of their checking. Then they have a robust drop test and visual test before actually approving that that product is usable. Whereas on the right, you see Wayron is quite generalized, no standardization, and it's basically just, oh, it looks good, I'm just gonna wrap it up and I'm gonna sell it to my customer. So in that case, it is kind of worrying because as much as you can test it, if there's a loose screw or something that is inside the product and you don't discover it, when you ship it to your customers would not be happy with the product, and that can cause inherent risks. Moving on, we can look at the further testing. So on the left, you can see DPK actually uses a hydraulic press to test each of the motors, and then they have a crash test as seen here. Whereas Wayron is quite brief and careless with their crash test as on top, and then they have a RAM test on the bottom as well. So as you can see, right, DPK actually has a dedicated area for each and individual testing, whereas Wayron is just like embedded in their working environment. Number one, this is not good for ensuring that the product is safe. Number two, the concern is worker health and safety. Okay, So lastly, in terms of defects, DBK actually has a very detailed process where they test each of the motors in the hydraulic press, and they separate it from the actual products that can be used. And in that terms, they are able to identify what issue they are and then segregate it. And then they do it at each of the processes. It's not shown here, but this is how they separate it from like what can be used. On the right, Dr. Neil actually asked about products that have defects, and they said that they have special areas that have defected items, and they claim that they have a very low defect volume. However, there was no proof of it. There was no demarcated zone in regards to that. So there's no actual proof that they have a defect control in as of this video. So as a case study, we looked at the whole line of it as a whole, and we came up with a few recommendations that they could put in place to help improve their processes. Even though DBK is already detailed and very high tech, they could incorporate more automation to help reduce the reliance on staff, and this would reduce, number one, human error, and reduce the chances of worker injuries occurring. Second is to identifying bottlenecks, which can help increase the product volume and trim down the overheads. And they can move towards a in-house production of materials to better reduce costs. Dr. Neil, I'm pretty sure that you mentioned that in the interview. Whereas there's so much more that they can do to improve their quality. The first would be establishing a proper production line with standard operating procedures, instructions, standardization of workflows. Second would be to use safety equipment when handling electronics such as anti-static wrist straps, and invest in QC. QC is the part where they really do lack the most. And lastly, this is a recommendation to install air curtains to limit dust, because dust is a very important factor when it comes to circuit boards, and it can damage circuit boards. So that is the end of our presentation for today. Thank you. Yeah, let me just flash this is some of our summaries on the DBK and Valon. Go down, all the way down. So as you can see, the biggest challenge for DBK is how can they perfectly match the motor with the main board and the hoverboard? Like, how do they ensure that every time they can create the best product out of what they have, and how to minimize the error? Wait, okay. Whereas Valon, the biggest issue with them is marketing, because they do it through very manual channels. Having a dedicated marketing channel would, in a sense, help them increase their exposure. And exposure would create some backlash onto them because of their products, but that would also be a motivator for them to improve into a better company. Yeah. So does anyone have any questions? If not,
Online, anyone online?
if no one has questions, I'll be asking the questions.
No question, but just an observation.
Go ahead.
I because we are very focused on health and safety. So that when I think DBK was doing the drop test,
Yes.
and the poor lady had to stand over the whole day to drop it. Yeah, sounds painful.
Well, you do have a point. It's about 15 kilos per hoverboard. So in a sense, in terms of improvement, I could add one to the list where they could, in a sense, have a better working station to improve their drop test.
Yes.
All right. Okay. If you guys don't have any other questions or observations, let me ask you a question. So based on this, how would you want DBK to further improve besides the ones that I've recommended? It's literally a perfect company, but how can it do better? Online? Anyone?
Any
There's not really hint. It's a very open question because Dr. Neil has already taught us so much. I think we could get bits and pieces from what he has taught so far to, in a sense, help us.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, Shamini presented your ERP.
Because the company Retalk, they actually, I'm pretty sure maybe DDK has as well the ERP system. The Retalk actually had an ERP system in place where they were tracking their raw materials. Even the smallest screws that they were using were being tracked and inspected for quality. So, one question, by the way, any like receiving material inspection being done here in any DBK or Villa?
Okay, in terms of very particular material inspections, no, but from what we've covered so far, they actually outsource most of their products, and they have in-house productions for things such as their motherboards, their casing and everything. However, they do actually do testing for their batteries coming in, which is the main problem that hoverboards have. So that has been very, very helpful in reducing the challenges that hoverboard companies have been facing in terms of battery testing. Lee, do you have anything to add on?
Yeah, just adding on, I think DBK also apply like they take like I think the sample test. So like if they found out like any like default battery, they will just send all the input product back to the suppliers. Yep. David, do you want to add on something?
Yes, sir. How can I help you today?
Just another observation. So I realized that from the crash test for both, so what they did is they just roll around and then they crash to the wall. Is there any standardization on the force? Because how do you determine the force then? Each crash is different force.
All right, okay. In terms of that, a very, very brief explanation. So there's only so much speed that can go into two small motors under your feet, correct? The reason why they do it in a very humanly test is because you're, in a sense, human, and there's a limit in terms of capabilities for each motor. And doing a real-life simulation of how a crash would happen, in a sense, gives them understanding of whether they have properly assembled their products or not. It's not really to test whether it will break under pressure or not. It's more of can my hoverboard hold the force that would, in a sense, be incurred on a day-to-day basis. Apologies, Levy's a bit sick, so yeah, we're having issues. Lee, anything to add on?
No, you have the perfect answer.
All right, Dr. Neil, I'm pretty sure you have questions.
Question to class and you too.
Okay.
Probably my general question is, what do you think the DNA is of these two companies? The DNA. Now, what do you think is at the core?
Can I?
Yeah.
Or Lee, do you want to go ahead?
You go first.
Right, okay. What else are you? What is this? What is this disgrace? I don't accept your biasness. I want inclusion. Okay. So coming back to the topic. Okay, DBK has a more manufactured DNA because they come from a battery manufacturing company. They already have their established workflows and production lines, which can in turn be transferred into any new projects. However, Wellon is more of a entrepreneur DNA, where they're just starting out and they only assemble hoverboards. They don't have any prior experience to what they're doing, which is not really advisable because having the experience of a prior production line helps you transfer whatever you have learned, the mistakes that you have made, into what you can do. Lee, anything to add on?
I think like for my opinion, I think both companies they are primarily like they are assembly plants, so they don't usually like manufacture their own products. Instead, they assemble product from other like outsource other suppliers. I believe maybe this is to like reduce their costs in R&D as well. So yeah, that's all from my website.
Yeah, very interesting, those two companies. So, and great effort, guys. Very interesting, those two companies. Like you just said then exactly, their battery, DBK's basically battery is in the DNA. Because in another part of the factory, they were making batteries to go into these micro credit cards that can be used to access bank accounts remotely.
So in a private in a video that Dr. Neil actually filmed, let me add on to what he said. So basically, they have been manufacturing like very, very small, I wouldn't say micro credit cards, but more of devices that allow you to access the banking system in China.
Yeah.
So with that prior knowledge, they already developed the systems that they can put in place when it comes to manufacturing electronic products.
Yeah. And actually, another thing too, DBK remember back in 2000 and this is going back 2016, 17, there's about 74 fires around the world. And DBK were the first company to get the UL standard. That is the official standard that allows you to import the hoverboards into the USA. And I think, as I said in the past, well, Wellon didn't care because I was selling to France and the Middle East anyway, so it didn't matter. But very interesting. Oh, good. Yeah, it's interesting comparison. Same product, but two different companies. Okay, well done, Joe, and well done. Great effort, guys.
Dr. Neil.
Very good.
Thank you, Doctor.
And Long, very good. Excellent.
Okay, also small apologies for the language.
The language?
Yeah, I was joking around.
English.
Sometimes. No. The choice of words.
Oh, that's all right. Okay. It's all right. No problem. All right. So without any further to do, I think we're going to make sure the class doesn't go too long because tomorrow's a holiday.
Yay.
All right. Everyone's so happy. All right. So I've just got some administration to do in terms of grading the groups. But what I want to do is just spend 5 minutes with the two groups that presented last week to give them feedback because we delayed that. And then that's all. The two groups that presented last week, where are you?
Last 2 weeks.
Huh?
Last week.
Online.
Oh yeah, online. Yeah, online fine, but last week too. Sorry, the week before last. Yeah, because we started talking, I didn't mix it up, so we need to get back to you. Right. So that's a bit of admin. So hang around. I'll just spend 5 minutes with you and fix up that, and then I'll talk to Suyun and Shamini. So just wrapping up. This is just the beginning of several weeks where we actually talk about how do the multinationals manage their suppliers. So next week we've got what's our name group? Iguana. We love the iguana, don't we? All right. Iguana, they're in Malaysia, aren't they? Yeah, they're around. So, and PQI. Who's doing PQI? Online PQI. That's like HCC and PQI cases are really, really interesting. Okay, because it's an example of how do you actually manage suppliers when you're doing millions and millions of products, not just 100 here and 100 there, or like 600 hoverboards that they were making one day. All right. So just want to keep my advice for you, especially, is just to keep sharp. I know you've got a lot of assessment going on in other units, not just my unit. You've got other assessments, so manage your time properly. My advice for you for your group project is meet for a very short time very, very frequently rather than delay. Oh, let's have a 3-hour meeting. It really isn't efficient that way. All right. You've got to meet every 2, 3, 4 days, even if it's just for half an hour. All right. You got to keep that fire moving along, because if you leave it to the last minute, you will not score very well based on what I've seen of students in the past. Okay. Meet frequently for a short time, much better than delay let's all do it in one day. It will not work out if you do that. Okay, that's my big advice. Have a lovely holiday tomorrow and long weekend, and I'll see you next week. And please do send questions through the email, and we can answer them as we go, but I will deal with giving feedback for the groups that presented last week. Okay, is there any? Yep. Okay. And everyone online, have a lovely day tomorrow.
Thank you, Doctor.
And
Thank you,
if
Doctor.
you and if you're in another country other than Malaysia, work hard. Work hard.
Yeah, will do.
Dr. Neil, he gives attendance code to movement of he gives attendance code.
Oh, I need to get the attendance code. So I'll dig it up on my computer and get to you. Thank you very much. I know, I heard that. Good presentation. Yeah.